Hi, Dave Scotland for AE Tuts, and welcome to part 2 of our 10-part series, Nuke in Production. And today we're going to take a look at channels, and specifically how channels work when it comes to CG multipass compositing. And we're going to jump in and out of 3D, After Effects and Nuke just to get our head around exactly how these work. And our main goal is to really have a look at how Nuke uses channels in multipass compositing, and just to cover some of the basics of channels in Nuke. Now, it's not a definitive look at channels. We will be exploring some of the other avenues for channels in Nuke over the next couple of lessons, but let's go ahead and get started and jump into 3D to have a look at where these channels actually start. So here we are in 3D Studio Max, and it doesn't matter if you're a Maya person, Cinema 4D or Blender. Just about any 3D application gives you the ability to save more than the basic channel set when you render an image. Now, what I mean by that is, here's an image and I've rendered it. It's just a simple scene that I have here. There's a couple of objects, and I've set up a couple of lights, and I've rendered that image into the frame buffer render window here. And by default, you will always get a red, green, and blue channel and an alpha channel in a render. And you can see here that it's RGB and alpha, and I can actually have a look at them individually. Here's my red channel, here's my green channel, and my blue channel, and I can have a look at the alpha channel as well. And it also gives me the ability to have a look at a monochromatic view, which just helps me understand the grayscale value of the image. So that's a basic render, and it's pretty much what you'll get in any application, any 3D application. But it's not where it has to stop. Thanks to various file types, and I'll explain that in a little bit more detail shortly, we can actually save more than just red, green, blue, and alpha information into the channel buffer of a file. Once we do that, we can then use that information when we get into our post-production process or our post-production software. Now, an example of some of the other channels that we can use might be a shadow pass. We might take a specular pass, reflection, refraction, and there is actually quite an extensive list of passes or channels that we can save into the file. Why do we do this? Well, that gives us more power and options in post-production without having to come all the way back to the 3D application and re-render the entire scene. Now, this might not be an issue if it only takes 10-15 seconds to render a frame, but in this day and age it could take hours, if not days, to render a single frame, depending on how detailed it is and what resolution it is. And you don't want to go back to that render process every time you want to tweak something individually in your scene. Perhaps tweak the shadows, maybe amend the highlights or how they're working in your scene. If they're separated in the actual render, then you can go in and individually tweak those things. So let's have a quick look at how we set these up. I'm using V-Ray at the moment, so every application does have a little bit slightly different methodology to set these up, but you'll find that at the heart of it, it's always going to be pretty much the same. There will be a feature that you can go in and set up render elements. Now in 3D Studio Max, we just bring up our render settings, and there's a tab called render elements. Now you will get this even if you're not using V-Ray, and you can use this same process to set up these render passes. So what I'm going to do is jump into my render elements here, and I'm going to click add, and you can see this large list of available channels that I can use. Now, a lot of those a little bit of overkill for what we want to do in this lesson, and this is not a V-Ray lesson, so I'm just going to grab a couple of the basic channels. The ones we tend to use the most are background. We also use the global illumination, the lighting. Material ID and object ID is another one that we use quite a lot, and I'll explain what they do shortly. We also take the reflection, refraction, Z depth, velocity if the camera or the objects are moving. It's a cheap way to get some good motion blur in post-production. Specular and shadows. So if I go OK to that, you'll see that I now have all these passes. I could render these passes out separately into separate files, but 3D Studio Max and pretty much any 3D application that you use today gives you the ability to actually render all of those passes into one file, packaged up in one file. And the file type that I'm talking about that seems to be extremely heavily used in the industry is an EXR file. So if I just go into, I'm in my V-Ray tab here, and I'm just going to go into my enable frame buffer and render to V-Ray raw image, tick that, and I'm going to browse to an image, and I might just bake it out to the desktop as a test here. So I'll just go test, and by default it's a V-Ray image, and I just change that to EXR, and I can tick 32-bit. We'll discuss that in a little bit more detail in one of our future lessons in the series. And I'm just going to go OK to that. Now, what that means is that it's a single file that's going to save all of those channels. But if I wanted to save them separately, I could just tick this little box here and I would get an image for each one of the passes that I've just set up. So what I'm going to do is very quickly render this, and I'll pause the video so you don't have to watch it render, and we'll see what we get from the render. So here's our render, and it doesn't look any different to our previous render, and as you can see the RGB looks exactly the same. But in our drop-down list we have a lot more channels, and if we take a look, we've got our alpha channel, here's our background, we've got global illumination, we've got lighting, material ID. This exists because when I created the materials, if I just bring up my material editor, and I'll just eyedrop on, say, the box, the blue box. Notice here that it is set to have a material ID of 4. On a new swatch, I'll grab the teapot, and it has a material ID of 3. So what I've done is I've set all of the materials to different IDs, and that allows for this render to have a material ID pass where there are different colors for each of the objects or each of the materials. I've also got an object ID, which also has an individual object ID number for each object in the scene. So if I was to select the box, right click and bring up the properties of the box, you would see that it has a G buffer object ID of 13, and every object in the scene has its own individual object ID, hence this render. So reflection, there's our reflection pass. We have our refraction pass. There's a lot of heavy refraction on the torus knot over here. And we've got shadows. We've also got specular. And the last one is our Z depth. So as you can see, we've saved all of those files or all of those layers into that file. Now, there is a little bit of a gotcha in rendering everything to one file. The files tend to get quite large. If I was to have a look at that file, it's around about 9, just under 10 megabytes for that one frame. And I've only rendered one frame. So whilst I might save a lot of space by rendering everything to one file, I will of course have to put up with larger individual file sizes. So let's go ahead and jump into After Effects just quickly and have a look at how we use these channels in After Effects. Okay, so here we are in After Effects, and I've rendered out a different scene. This one is, let's just bring up the reference pass or the beauty pass. What you're looking at here is the beauty pass of the render. It's exactly what we would get in an RGB render, and you can see up here it says millions of colors plus, and it is simply just an RGB render without any individual passes. And I've just brought that in just as a reference. But if we have a look, we have other passes. I've rendered these out as individual layers so that you can see how we composite these up in After Effects. So I've got a specular layer, self-illumination, we have some reflections, we have diffuse, and we also have our background pass. Now, it's worth noting that the diffuse pass is actually rendered with shadows rather than have an extra shadow pass. So let's go ahead and comp these up. So we've got a composition here. The first one I usually lay down as my background layer. So in this instance, it's just a black layer. Then I'll go with my diffuse over the top, and I'm going to set the blending mode to add. Then I'm going to take my reflections, place that over the top of my diffuse, and once again set that to add. And then I'll grab my self-illumination, place that over the top. This one also is an add layer. And the last one is my specular, and I'll place that over the top, and that will also be an add. And if I double click on my beauty pass, double click, and just put this side by side, you'll see that this is the beauty pass with all of the layers as if it was rendered in the 3D application. And this is the layer, this is the multi-pass composited version. And as you can see, they match. And that is always the goal with multi-pass compositing. You always start off with these matching. And then basically what we can do, because I've got these separate, I can come in here now and maybe take my self-illumination, maybe put a stylize glow, and you can see that it only applies to the self-illuminated elements within the scene, which is just these lamps. There's a little bit of self-illumination on the outside, but it's a dark color, so we don't see it too much. I can bring up the glow radius here and tweak this, maybe bring the threshold up slightly, a little bit more intensity, and just play with it until I get the look that I'm going for. Something like that. And it's only on the self-illumination. Now that's why we do multi-pass compositing, is we need to be able to tweak this stuff without going back to the render and having it fully rendered again just to tweak one of the elements. And it also seemed like it might seem a bit like a bit of overkill. Why don't we just mask it out and apply some effects? Well, the reason usually is movement. So if the camera or the subject is moving, then that masking becomes a very painful process, and it's never as accurate as rendering out as a separate pass from your 3D software. So let's go ahead and jump into Nuke now and see how we do this process in a Nuke environment. Okay, so here we are in Nuke, and I've read in my EXR file, my shapes and channels EXR file. You'll have this file to play around with this process in Nuke in your source files, your downloaded source files. So the first thing we can do is actually try to assess what channels we have with our file. And the easiest way to do that is to use a purpose-built node that is perfect for it. And it's called the Layer Contact Sheet node. So just go ahead and hit your tab to bring up your menu, your node creation tab creator. And it's called a Layer Contact Sheet, and there it is there. And what you're going to get is a breakdown presented to you on a single image, all of the layers or channels that are saved in this EXR file. So yeah, as you can see, it's a little slow to render, but it is quite large. It has a 3000 by 2000 resolution, and by default show layer names is not ticked, so let's go ahead and tick that, and you'll see that it'll actually list the layers that are built into the file. They're the ones that we saved earlier. In fact, there are a couple of others that I've included in there just so that you can have a bit of fun with some of these layers and see what you can get out of them. But let's come in here. We've got our RGB, we've got our depth, which is our Z depth, and in this instance it's actually been saved into or interpreted in the red channel. We've got our V-Ray, our background, our global illumination, our object ID normals. We've got our material ID, lighting, V-Ray lighting, reflection, refraction, global illumination, V-Ray shadows, and the last one is specular over here. Now, remember our goal is to try to composite all of those layers together to basically get this render pass here. And so what I'm going to do is show you how to do that. But before I do, I just want to show you how to assess your layers in a little bit more detail than using the layer contact sheet. It's good to see all of the layers you have, but sometimes you want to get in and really have a look in full res what your layers are. And the way to do that is use this drop down box up here. In our last lesson I did say that I would come back to this and show you in a bit more detail. This little section of your viewer is all about layers. Over here we've got our RGB and alpha section, so I could have a look at the red. This is the red values or red channel of the image. Here is the blue channel of the image and the green channel. We've also got the alpha, and then we have our RGB. We can also look at our luminance, but most of the time we spend looking at our RGB channel view here. But over on the left hand side, here are all the channels that are in this file that I'm looking at the time. Wherever the viewer's piped into, that's what we're going to see up in here. So I've got my background layer, global illumination, and I can go right down through the list and have a look in a lot more detail, and it's a lot faster than using the contact layer sheet. And really, once you've assessed what you've got in the file, this is the way we look at channels in Nuke. So we can have a look at all of our channels and get ready to composite them up and know exactly what sort of channels and what sort of information we have in those channels. So let's go ahead and composite this multi-pass render to match the output, and that way we're going to have a fair idea of the difference of this process between After Effects and Nuke. So let's go back to our RGBA, and down in our node graph you can see I've got a viewer piped in, and that's what we're seeing up here. So I'll just give us a little bit of real estate. Maybe close this up just a bit so we can see what we're doing. And we've got our properties bin over on the right hand side, our properties pane. The way that we do this, you've really got to stop thinking in terms of layers, and you need to start thinking in terms of merging channels over one another, or merging assets over one another. Over, under, add, plus, any combination, but it's through a merge process that makes it so different from After Effects. And let me show you what I mean. The first thing we've got to do is break out our channels, and the way we do that is we use a shuffle node. So I'm just going to highlight my image. I'm going to bring up my tab, SHU, and there it is, shuffle. And I'm going to break this over to the left here for a second. You'll see in the drop down list we have all of our layers here, and basically what I can do is take the V-Ray background layer here. So to make life a little easier, we can go into the back node tab here and just type in BG. That's our background. Now, a little trick with the tab button to create nodes, it will remember the last node we created. So when I hit tab once, notice shuffle is there, and if I hit tab again, it'll create a shuffle node. Now it's created it underneath here. Now if I delete that, that's because it was selected. But if nothing is selected, I could go tab, tab, and there's another shuffle. I'm just going to keep that process going, tab, tab, and I'm just creating a bunch of shuffle nodes for now because I know I'm going to need them. This second one here, I'll just move these off to the side for now. This one, I'm going to pipe into my image, double click on it to bring it up here, and the one I want is my global illumination, and if I pipe my viewer into it, here is my global illumination pass. So I can jump into the node, and this is my GI or global illumination, and I can see it easily in the node graph. I'll pipe the next one in, just bring it over. Shortcut is 1 to pipe my viewer into the node, and double click on the shuffle. And what I want is my lighting pass. So I can also name that. And I'm going to keep going down the line here. I'm going to shuffle in, the next one I'll shuffle in is my refraction, and just name that refract, and you can see this is my refraction here. Just make sure that I've got refraction. No, I have reflection. I was wondering why I was seeing so much. So refraction, there we go. And the next shuffle is reflection. So I'll double click, bring up my reflection, and I'll just name that. Always pays to name your nodes where you can, just so that at a glance you can see what it is, and also so that if you are working with other artists, it's a lot easier for other artists to follow what you've done. So this one here is going to be our self-illumination, and it's just the ring that's on the teapot there. So this is self-illum. And the last one we need, tab tab, is our specular. So I'll just change that to our spec, and we'll name that as well. And we'll just have a quick look at the specular. And there it is, just those couple of highlights there. So we're good to go as far as shuffling out our images. Now what we need to do is layer up or composite these in the correct order. Now the order I've laid them out is the order I like to use, and there are some minor variations that artists tend to use, but this one has always worked for me, and I suggest you give it a go and play with it from this point and develop your own technique. But you'll find there's not a lot of wiggle room when it comes to this order. So let's go ahead and clear out our properties bin there. The way I like to create merges or merge nodes is I select the one that I want to be the B pipe first, then I hold shift and select the one I want to be the A pipe, and then if I hit my hotkey M for Mary, it will automatically place the pipes to the right nodes or the correct nodes. So what I've got here is my background. I've got my global illumination over the top. I'm just going to pipe my viewer into that so we can see it. But if I double click on the merge node, I need to change the operation to plus. Now what I can do is select my merge node and hold shift and select my lighting. Hit M to make another merge, and what we're doing is merging the previous operation as the B pipe, the dominant pipe, and then over it I'm merging my lighting pass. In fact, it's not over, it's a plus. So go ahead and change your operation to plus. Do the same again, highlight the merge, highlight the refract, hit M, change it to plus. Highlight the merge, highlight reflect, hit M, change it to plus. And you can see we're forming a bit of a pattern here. Grab those two and this one and this one, hit M, change it to plus. And then the last one is our specular. So just hit or highlight merge, highlight our specular shuffle, and hit M for Mary, double click, and plus. Now, if we've done this correctly, what we can do is take our viewer, which at the moment is piped into the one pipe for the viewer. Then I can take my original image and hit 2, and that way I've got my viewer has a 1 and a 2 pipe. I can come up to my wipe section here, set it to wipe, and what you're looking at is, notice A of the wipe is the read node, which is this one. Our original image is the read node, and the B of the wipe is set to my merge 6, which is the last merge down here. And you'll see that as I move this from left to right, nothing is different. There's a little bit of subtle difference. There's a couple of pixels in it, which I could certainly jump back into Max and fix that issue with the render, with the output renders. But you can see that it is identical to my original beauty render. My RGB render is absolutely pixel perfect to my multipass render or my multipass compositing down here. Now, to really help you understand what I'm doing here, I'm just going to switch off this one, just so that you can see that what I'm doing is I'm wiping between my original image and my composited image. And what I've done is I've switched off the lighting merge or the lighting pass, just to show you that it is actually different if I do that. If I switch that back on, there's no difference between these two. Now that means we've achieved what we wanted as far as our merge operation. But you might think, well, why do we do that in Nuke? Well, for the same reason we did it in After Effects. We have all of this extra control now that we have these separated. So I could zoom in here. I'm just going to get rid of my wipe and go back to my my final merge node here. I'm even going to break off my two pipe from the viewer. So what I'm actually looking at here is my composited stream. So I could take maybe this self-illumination, and how about we add some glow to the self-illumination. So what I'm going to do is just highlight the shuffle and bring up my tab, GL, and there's my glow. And what I can actually do with that is, you can see straight away we get a result, and it's only on the glow channel. Nothing else in the scene is glowing. And how about we just bring our size down a little bit. We could even tint our glow slightly, just saturate it up a bit. Something like this should be okay. Okay. We could even play with the brightness of the glow, really have it glow out. I could even, it's pretty harsh, the original, if I just switch the glow off for a second. And remember, D is the hotkey to disable a node, so you can toggle. What I'm going to do is, just after the self-illumination, I'm going to put a blur in there. And what this is going to do is it's going to take that self-illumination pass, which looks like this, and I'm going to blur it. So if we come back a little bit, just blurring the pass about there. And then if I come down to my glow, you can see if I just disable the blur on and off, you'll see it's a lot less harsh, the actual edge of that ring, and it's making it feel a little bit more like, say, a neon sign or something like that. So let's go ahead and go back to our full multipass render, and you can see there that I've got a nice glow happening in there. I could also take my specular pass here and maybe put a grade node on that, and maybe just play with some of the options in the grade node just to give maybe gain up the specular highlights a little bit, bring them out, and I could even maybe just bring up a blur as well. You'll notice that there's a bit of noise, and that's because of the render. I rendered quite quickly, but I'm going to try and take some of that noise out by blurring those specular highlights a little bit. And you can see that those little dots of noise aren't so drawing attention to themselves so much. So as you can see, mission accomplished as far as multipass compositing our scene and having then the ability to individually tweak certain elements of the shot without having to go back to 3D Studio Max or to our 3D application. Now, this is not the only way that we can actually composite a multipass render, and I'm going to show you an alternative. I'm just going to take a copy of my scene here, Control C, and then Control V over here. Bring my viewer up onto that read node, and let's just have a look. If I just hit M and bring up a merge and place it underneath, let's just have a look at what a merge node looks like here. It's got an operation up the top here, and as I've said before, we have all these extra operations like plus, screen. A lot of them are familiar to us Photoshop and After Effects users. And down here we've got some channels, channel A and channel B. And we used this scenario back over here where we took channel B and we plussed or used the plus operation with channel A over the top. So let's have a look at what happens if I take the A and the B pipe and pipe them into the image. It goes a little bit brighter, but if we tweak this and we make the A channel the global illumination and we make the B channel the background and we set it to plus, we have exactly, if I come across here and look at this one, notice they're exactly the same. So I'm now currently looking at this operation over here. Whoop, this one. And it is identical to this operation here. It just is represented visually in our node graph a little bit different. Now, if you're not quite getting what's going on here, what I can do is bring up a dot node and place it off to the side here. I'm going to pipe it into my original read node or image and take the A pipe and put it into the dot node and take the B pipe and put it into the image. So the A pipe is coming from the image, the B pipe is coming from the image, but the A pipe in my merge node is set to the global illumination channel, and the B pipe is set to my background channel or my main channel, my dominant channel. So let's continue along that same vein. Let's hit another merge and pipe the A also into the dot, which means it's getting it straight from the read node, and the A, we'll get rid of this property here. The A is the one that we need to change, but the B we're going to keep because the B is feeding from the previous node. So it's only the first one that needs the two channels to be amended. The second one just needs to have the A channel amended to lighting. Then we just change this to plus. We go with another merge, pipe the A channel into the dot node, double click so we're looking at the right one. This one's a plus, and the A channel is our refraction. We'll do another merge, pipe the A channel into the dot. Give ourselves a bit of real estate here. Double click on it, change it to plus, and the A channel is reflection. Do another merge. Bring the dot node down a little bit. Pipe the A channel in. So we're just maintaining this same process, and the A channel this time is my self-illumination as a plus, and then I'm hitting another merge. This pipe the A channel in. This one is a plus, and the A channel is my specular. So let's have a look. Did we achieve what we need to, which is the number one pipe in our viewer the same as our original image? Do we composite it back to our beauty pass? So let's go ahead and check it. So I now have 1 and 2 pipe. I can go into my wipe, making sure read to, which is this one, is in my A viewer, and merge 12 down the bottom here is in my B viewer. And as you can see, absolutely no difference. It's exactly what we're looking for. So to really, I'll get rid of that too. To really understand what's going on here, I can make it a little bit tidier. I'm just holding control to bring up or break this into an elbow. And I can do that with all of these guys just to show you roughly what's going on. Keep it nice and tidy. We're piping, all of the A channels are coming from the original image without anything in between, but the B channels are processing one after the other and getting more and more information into the image each time we process a merge, and we're plussing as we move down our pipe, or we move down our stream. So that's our final one there, and as you can see, it works exactly the same. So that's an alternative to our multi-pass compositing process. This one here, I believe, is a little bit more intuitive, and it allows for manipulation of those channels a little bit easier. This one here is quicker. As you saw, it was a lot quicker to put together. It doesn't involve any shuffle nodes, but it is a lot harder to really understand exactly what's going on with the pipes, especially if it didn't have these dot nodes. So some people even use this process where they take all their A pipes and they pipe them straight up and down the tree, and this is known as inline multi-pass compositing, and that means these dot nodes aren't even required, but you'll see that the image is exactly as it should be. Problem with this is that it makes it extremely difficult to know where to put in any changes exactly in the process, and you end up having to break a lot of this stuff out anyway. I prefer to work in this method over here. What I could show you is I will tend to use a backdrop like this. I'll just pull it over here and I'll scale it up. So I'm just going to put it here and scale it up about there. Just going to move it down. So what you're looking at, and I'll do one more backdrop. I'm going to place this one up the top here under my shuffles. So I've got my shuffles up the top, and I'll double click on that and give it a little bit different color. Down here, I've got my merges. Double click on that. Whoop. Make it maybe a green color. So basically anything that's in between is processing the individual elements. So, and I can make these as long as I want. I can put as many objects as I want into this. I could stretch them out a little wider if I don't have enough. If I don't have enough real estate there, I could pull this over a little more and pull my backdrop over a little more, and just keep it nice and tidy. But the thing I try to do is keep things nice and organized so that at a glance I can really see what's going on there. Even this, I don't like diagonal lines there, so I tend to hold control, just bring down some dot nodes and just minimize those diagonal lines so I can really see that they're piping into this merge node here. That allows me to affect this downstream pipe scenario here. So there you go. There are one or two other options that we can explore with multipass rendering, and as we move forward in the series, you will see me use some variations on this multipass scenario, but these two are the main ones that I use and variations of them. As we move forward, definitely I'll draw attention to some of the variations and you'll get to see those in practice. So hopefully you've understood what I've covered today, and we've managed to have a quick look at how to create some basic channels. We've had a look at what the basic channels are, the RGBA, and then what the other channels are, or what some of the other channels are. There are plenty there available. We've also had a look at why we need them and how to create them. And we've looked at how to composite them in After Effects, albeit very basic, very entry level. And we've also had a look at the same process in Nuke and some subtle, some major differences between After Effects and Nuke when it comes to compositing multipass rendering. So I hope you've enjoyed today's episode, and next time around we're going to have a look at tracking, and we're going to have a look at how different tracking is between After Effects and Nuke, and really explore some of the powerful tracking features of Nuke. That's it for me. Until next time, bye for now.